Are you a healthcare professional looking for a trusted concussion resource? Then you've come to the right place. From her New York City studios, welcome to Concussion Corner with your host, Dr. Jessica Schwartz.
Hello, and welcome to Season 5 of the Concussion Corner podcast. My name is Dr. Jessica Schwartz, and I'm your host, and this is a special APTA CSM edition from the 2023 San Diego American Physical Therapy Combined Sections meeting. We are going to have part 2 with Dr. Becky Bliss today, and what's great is that the APTA CSM conference is happening February 23rd to February 25th, with over 15,000 participants coming back to participate in this conference. So this episode with Dr. Bliss, we're going to be talking about technology, the cognitive flexibility of physical therapists, meeting our learners where they are and where they were during the pandemic, and the technology and the time and the expertise and the intuitiveness that it took to create some online virtual learning. We will talk about active learning, the importance of case-based reasoning and to engage learners so they aren't passively receiving, which is great. You'll actually hear that Dr. Bliss did some of this interactive experiential learning during her pre-conference with the American Academy of Sports Physical Therapy. We talk about the virtual visit in the concussion world specifically. And at the end of the day, if you'd ever like to come learn with us, we have an academy. It is called Concussion Corner Academy, and it is 20 or 40 hours of bicronous learning. So it's synchronous and asynchronous learning where you can learn with us from all over the world. Come join our over 100 interdisciplinary graduates. We have CE for PT, OT, and athletic trainers. Specifically for ATs, it's BOCA, so I know people get excited about that. And we can't wait to meet you. Tell a friend, please like and subscribe. It really helps a small business like ourselves to try to keep going, keep motivated. It's been over a year and a half since we've been back on the podcast. We are so grateful for your support and our listeners from all over the world, and we cannot wait for you to meet Dr. Bliss. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce Dr. Bliss. She is a clinical assistant teaching professor in the Doctorate of Physical Therapy program at the University of Missouri and is board certified in neurological physical therapy. She holds her certificate in vestibular rehabilitation from the American Physical Therapy Association, as well as an advanced vestibular certificate, and is also impact trained as a physical therapist. Her research includes dysfunction of the vestibular ocular reflex following MTBI, which is synonymous in 2023 with concussion, as well as early detection of impairments that lead to post-concussive syndrome, also known as persistent post-concussive symptoms, and is currently on several active studies specific to higher level motor control deficit identification in the sport athlete. Dr. Bliss is active within the Academy of Neurological Physical Therapy and is currently involved in the knowledge translation project related to evidence-based practice at MU Health. Additionally, we are so lucky to have Dr. Bliss as a faculty member here at Concussion Corner Academy on our Academy side, and we could not be more thrilled to have her back on the podcast to kick off our Season 5 APTA CSM edition opener. Here's part 2 with Dr. Becky Bliss. We hope you guys have a great combined sections meeting. Be safe, enjoy the camaraderie of your colleagues, and we can't wait to meet you guys soon. Okay, take care. Okay, welcome back to part 2 of Concussion Corner Shorts with Dr. Becky Bliss. Becky, how are you doing today?
I am great. It's the day before I leave for CSM, so trying to get all of my meetings and all my calendar straight and make sure that, meal prep, kid stuff, husband's tracking all the different kid meetings and transportation. So it's always a little bit anxiety driven until I get on the plane.
Yeah, and I think that's real life 101. So we all respect that for sure. We just covered with you all things CSM. You're heading over to CSM to do the pre-con lecture with the American Academy of Sports Physical Therapy with some all-stars there. And again, if we even just kind of connect to 2001, the first international consensus statement, or 2000, I guess, the first international consensus statement back in, I think it was Zurich. And we just kind of finished up in the fall with really coming 360 full circle. So if we think about physical therapists in this country, in the United States, we're 101 years old as a profession. We started as rehabilitation aides in the trenches, literally during World War I. And what were we treating? We were treating TBI, traumatic brain injuries and closed head injuries, all the way from concussion to severe TBI. So it's really a full circle moment. If we think about, Dr. Catherine Schneider up in Calgary, she's actually going to be the lead, and she coordinated the international consensus statement for 2022. The data is going to be published in BJSM end of spring, early summer. And we're all the way through going from just a consensus statement to actually having systematic reviews and evidence-based practice. And 2017 was the first formal year that we called the injury of concussion rehabilitative. So it's so exciting to have you and your other rehabilitative providers and colleagues at the largest conference in the world for physical therapy and rehab with 15,000 plus people. It's in San Diego. If you're going to CSM or you're listening in, it's February 23rd to the 25th in San Diego, California. There are going to be over 15,000 participants, 18 specialty sections and academies, 300 plus sessions, and 1,200 posters. And the brilliance of all that is that this is an interdisciplinary injury of concussion, and you have interdisciplinary providers coming from the geriatric, pediatric, sports, orthopedic, the whole gamut, cardiovascular. Everyone's going to be there. So, and neuro and so on. So I think it's so apropos that you, as a neurological clinical specialist and doctor of physical therapy, true clinician scientists, really, bootstraps on the ground, are going to be presenting with the Sports Academy for the pre-con. So we're so stoked to have you back on.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I just feel like, all the stars were aligned in my career. So I've been afforded so many blessings and opportunities that I couldn't have dreamed or imagined.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, it's been a pleasure to also learn from you as well, both on the podcast and at Concussion Corner Academy. So again, really, this is exciting. So let's just chat. Now that folks have kind of heard what you're going to be doing at APTA CSM, as things are going on, let's talk a little bit about the last few years. I mean, if we think about how technology has kind of been forced to we've had to be forced to adapt with technology and vice versa. So I'd love to see if you have some clinical pearls or saliency to what you've kind of learned for not only delivering education to people who are learning from you, both entry level and postdoc, but also from the same time from the patient perspective with what you learned with virtual care and being able to touch people from distances outside of your arm's reach. So I'd love to hear some thoughts there.
I'll start education and then circle back to clinical, if that's okay. So education wise, I remember back in 2020, it was the week before spring break when we knew it was coming. We knew we were going to shut down and go full virtual in entry level DPT. And they gave us the week of spring break to prepare. So there was no vacationing. It was, hey, after spring break, we are transitioning. And I was teaching pathophysiology, very case-based clinical reasoning, lots of student groups, lots of student interactions, and made it work. I feel super blessed so that my Doctorate of Health Science degree was very much 50% science of teaching and learning and best practice in education. So I used all of the cool things like flip grids for them to interact with each other and video feedback, like I was still there. Zoom breakout rooms, which disastrous in the beginning until you learned how to assign them. But we made it work. And actually, interesting enough, we were just talking about that faculty-wise, how many things that we learned from the pandemic stuck. So our students, especially being online, that they could absorb information like an asynchronous lecture on their own and have the time to pause, deeply think. If they didn't understand something, look it up. They now prefer that flipped lecture model. And that's across everything. I think we're seeing it in our post-professional that are engaging in continuing education as well. Obviously, that's something in the Concussion Corner Academy. I have my own CEU company. That is definitely something that has come out of the pandemic, is a different mode of learning. And then it's individualized to the learning with that flipped content. For me, based on educational principles and best practice, those flip recordings can't be super long because we can't sit deaf by, you know what I mean? So they need to be in these nice short chunks, kind of like what you're doing, to be able to stay engaged the entire time. And so that's kind of one of those things that has stuck. I do it in entry level, I do it in residency education, and then I also do it for continuing ed for the post-professional type of environment. And it works really well. And then that's followed by interacting either virtually, everybody all together, kind of in that, just model of virtual Zoom meetings with everybody's screen showed so that we can all learn from each other, or now back in the classroom. So that for me is great. I think lots of things happened. And what I found during the pandemic from a CEU perspective is people still needed to keep up with their CEUs, but there was nothing in person offered. So we actually did a lot of national journal clubs specific to concussion. Tad Seifert from Kentucky really led that. And I mean, I got to sit and learn from John Letty, like talking about his like submaximal threshold exercise kind of literature. It was wonderful to interact nationally with people, even in that respect. So people got creative on how they were going to disseminate and stay up to date on current evidence and research. So, and then now what we're seeing is I've offered some live in person and they're attended, but people sometimes prefer the virtual option because they can do it and absorb it on their own time, as well as post-pandemic with everything that happened financially across the profession. There's not as much available CEU money, in all honesty, for kind of that in-person large chunk of, you know, so many credits and it just being very expensive. So that's kind of what I'm experiencing now. But I think interacting with people, no matter how, as long as you make it creative and you're adhering to the principles of the learning sciences, it makes it so that it's absolutely doable. And it's adaptability. What we're asking, right, our future students, our future professionals to be is adaptable in the moment. So we need to adapt for our learners.
Yeah, and we asked our patients to adapt for us as well. We have to adapt their functional ability and mobility based off of what their deficits are in front of us. And there's no reason that we shouldn't be one of the most cognitively flexible professions. But again, you know, unless this happened, we have to really connect to really 2006 was kind of where that exponential growth of everything happened, from Instagram, Uber, you know, all of these things kind of started like just opening up, YouTube, where we have to actually meet our learners where they are and how they prefer to learn. And if you think about it, even if, you know, you have the blessing of being able to go to the combined sections meeting for American Physical Therapy Association, that costs thousands of dollars to do, you know, unless you have financial support from an institution or your employer. And again, folks have kids, folks have real lives. And to stop what you're doing to do that is a big deal. And it definitely is a gift. But it's also a gift to be able to kind of reverse engineer all of that as well and attend it virtually. So APTA, CSM is actually going to be able to be attended virtually. So you can attend the sessions. And I think it's for up to like 30 days or something after they give you some access to that, which is also a gift. So people can actually learn kind of in this bicronous sense, which we offer a bicronous learning environment at Concussion Corner Academy, where it's asynchronous and synchronous for you. So we have these pre-recorded lectures, and then we have live Q&As with yourself and our faculty, so that people can kind of like almost like rest and digest. They can process the information, and then they can ask the questions live, which I think is really such a great way. You know, if you think about it, if you're a lot of folks are lecturing, probably not you, Becky, but a lot of folks are lecturing through and they'll have like a 10 or 15 minute Q&A at the end. And are people really learning that way? Because they're kind of being spoken at. It's not, you know, interactive. So I know that you're starting to wiggle and kind of just get a sense of, I know what you're doing right now is just so unique, and hopefully people will start to replicate the way in which you teach and take note.
Yeah, I think it's coming down the pipe. I know somebody who's on the planning committee for CSM, and I think that's already in the works for next year when they're submitting proposals. So they need that active learning component, whether it be a quick break in a practice or, you know, case-based reading or case-based reasoning or a think, pair, share or something, so that the learners are engaging with each other and not just sitting there and passively receiving. So.
Yeah. And
no, I was just going to switch to clinical, but I can let you.
Yeah, no. So I was just going to lead into that. So I was going to say, you know, as we finish up this one, you know, let's talk a little bit about, you know, the virtual visit and how that's kind of changed exponentially as well, where there was so much barrier and just kind of this rigid way of thinking of like, we didn't want to do that because it took time. It took a huge growth and change and adaptability and learning curves and things like that. But again, I think the blessing of this pandemic has really been that we've been able to adapt and that we've been kind of meeting the software, and the software's also been meeting us. And then we've also been able to use our creative minds as we are as physical therapists to adapt our delivery. So, you know, what are you finding specific to the concussion world with virtual visits and follow-ups and even reevals, you know, through the virtual space?
I actually had a case study at the 2017 APTA CSM poster on using tele-rehab and concussion management. So I've been doing it since 2016 is when we did it, and then we presented in 17. And really, like, I managed an entire case from initial eval through treatment to discharge via tele, with a medical provider on the other side that had knowledge of the tests and measures who could perform things for me. So it was an athletic trainer on the other side, and I helped manage. And so it's not new, but we really had to take a deep dive into people who are uncomfortable about like giving up that ability to touch and be there and tell the patient what to do in the person, like, or in the moment. Or in person is, that was hard. I've got a colleague here, Jamie Hall, who actually did some qualitative research in pediatrics. So when they transitioned during COVID, like really going into the home and like the hard things that the clinicians experienced, but then also the growth of seeing the home environment, seeing what Sally and, Joey do, like brother and sister, and like what it really looks like. Right. And so I think that I transitioned pretty quick. We developed a Zoom HIPAA platform, safe here at the University of Missouri. So I literally went from seeing patients in the clinic to follow-ups on tele. And so it worked well. What I really learned was the kind of in their own home environment, what the relaxed state looks like, but then also what the chaos may look like. I remember seeing a 12-year-old boy and, lots of brothers and sisters, a German Shepherd jumping up on him during like our intervention, like mom yelling at the other kids, like just mass chaos. And so you really get to understand like what they're experiencing at home rather than this sterile clinic environment where you have things that are all controlled in that closed environment. So it's true, authentic, right? Environmental assessment. For the camera, I mean, you guys can see, I'm going to get really close. You can see my eyeballs. So from Zoom, I just talk my patient through tracking their own finger. Looking at something for near point, we can actually have them do like alternate cover, cross cover test. As long as they're safe and they're standing near something, balance assessments, somebody there to adapt, like if they're doing a dual task tandem gait test or like the functional gait assessment. And then you actually, John Letty's work, you can actually prescribe submaximal threshold aerobic activity without the Buffalo concussion treadmill test, if they don't have a treadmill at home for you to run them through. And so it's using your resources appropriately and adapting for what the needs are in that moment. So I actually sometimes will just do virtual check-ins for my patients that have to travel a long amount of time, because this is intervention that they can be doing on their own, and really perpetuating that it is self-manageable and teaching them the tools for that. So obviously doing a lot of education.
Yeah. And if you just think of, where we were a few years ago, maybe a decade ago, where we were able to see patients 2 or 3 times a week, and with limitations of people's time, third-party payers' ability to want to pay for rehab, and how we have to adapt to that. Oftentimes, instead of seeing folks 2 or 3 times a week, we're seeing folks 1, maybe twice a week. So if this could potentially give us access to them with increased frequency, because again, I think we're forgetting about the frequency, intensity, duration of the importance and the saliency and the repetition matters for neuroplasticity and just rehab in general. We're often seeing the patient 1 time a week. Really, is that the best for them? And we here in New York, I don't know about you out there, we have some folks limited to 30-minute hard treats. And I don't know about you, but my pediatric or geriatric patients, it takes them like 7 minutes to take their shoes off and tie them and retie them again. So, there goes a third of the session. So I think this just gives us people access. I also think if we connect to our neuro patients or like our concussion, MS patient type patients, we also remember that there's a neuro fatigue associated with this as well. And that this may be able to just help give them access to care in just a different way. It's not better or worse, I kind of think in my head, but it's just different and just gives options. And I think options are great, especially if there's issues with financial, socioeconomic, access, things like that, disability, things like that. In New York for, Access-a-Ride, well, it's a great service and it costs the same amount to take a bus, take an Access-a-Ride. Oftentimes those people are late and then they miss appointments at the hospital, and it's devastating. So how can we access folks with less energy? They can perform and do more for us in rehab in their home. I just think it's just been a really wonderful thing that's kind of come out of these last few years.
Yeah. And I also think with some of the like app-based technology, like a lot of the times if I want to check in with a patient, like I will use like the Sway app for instance, because you can give your patient an individualized code and they can actually run through the assessment tool, either me watching via video or just on their own. which is really nice. And so there's some good validation studies out there that you can do it as a remote access. I love technology. I love using all that stuff. So.
Yeah, same here. And we can talk for days. And I know you have to go to clinic. So I want to just give folks kind of an amuse-bouche of where you're going to be. Because again, we have folks in 60 countries and all 50 states listening to us here at Concussion Corner. So I know that you're going to be at some Brain Injury Association and some APTA conferences. So where can people find you throughout 2023?
Yeah, so March, I'm going to be at the Missouri Brain Injury Association Conference presenting on research updates. Then I travel to the Mid-America Athletic Training Association annual conference in Omaha, Nebraska, March 17th and 18th. And then I'll be in Kansas City at the National Training Center, Compass Minerals for the MLS Soccer League, presenting a one-day advanced concussion course, and that is March 25th. And then over the summer, I'm actually going to be in Springfield, Missouri with Mercy Health, doing a comprehensive kind of multidisciplinary concussion conference for them, which will be super exciting. In September, I am going to be at APTA New Jersey, co-presenting with Laura Morris and Cheryl Davidson and Rob Landell and John Letty, kind of that approach to updated concussion care. And then I'm trying to think, I feel like there was, in
APTA
October,
Arkansas.
APTA Arkansas. I have to keep these all straight and memorized. So it is a busy travel year for me. It's not virtual. So I've done the years when it's all virtual and the recording. So it's exciting to get it so that I'm actually in person and I do get to travel. So.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And if you guys want to meet Dr. Bliss through our academy at Concussion Corner, we have strictly on-demand March and June on-demand access to her and all of our faculty that include Dr. Christina Master, Dr. John Letty, Dr. Lenore Herget, Dr. Bliss, Dr. Egan Johnson, and Dustin Fink for our Athletic Training 101. And those are strictly on demand in March and June, starting March 26th, and I think June 18th. And then we'll have our Bicronus in September, starting class opens. Everyone thinks it's Labor Day, and I'm not an animal. Here we are, but we open access to folks on the Sunday of Labor Day for our September course in the fall, and that is both for on-demand and Bicronus learning, where you'll have live access to our faculty as well. And if you have any questions as well in terms of you'd like to take the March or June course strictly on demand just to get the information and data, and then you'd like to upgrade and come into the live course in September, that's totally fine too. So we're open to all those things. And Becky, we're so happy to have you back on the road, getting this teach one, serve many mentality out. Folks are going to be lucky to experience learning from you. I hope you have a great APTACSM. And what's the best way for folks to find you online?
Yeah, I think Twitter is the easiest. I do my daily dose of Twitter when I drink my first cup of coffee in the morning and kind of scroll. So my Twitter handle is @BLissDPT. If you want to look me up that way and just DM or tag or something, somehow we can connect. That would be wonderful.
Awesome. And just a brief clinical pearl for folks that are, maybe novice or been treating for 30 years in the concussion space, brief clinical pearl kind of pep talk for folks that are a little bit feeling worried about looking at or treating a concussion patient.
Yeah, I think the big thing is know your team. And don't be afraid to ask for help and resources and friends. I still phone a friend every day because it is such a heterogeneity, please help me with that word. It's morning. Heterogeneous injury
population. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, population, that you've got to have a team approach. And so don't be afraid to partner and find a mentor and figure somebody, like if somebody has been treating this injury for a long amount of time, pick their brain and seek out to try to rectify and fill your own gaps in knowledge until you gain that clinical experience.
Yeah, and I think that's just a yellow flag kind of for everyone that's out there looking for education, is we're looking for this interdisciplinary model for this interdisciplinary injury. And we have to make sure we're reaching across the aisle comfortably to say, I don't know, but let me take the time to find out, and really just validating that patient symptom profile from a rehabilitative approach. So we're so lucky to have you on the ground doing what you're doing. And I hope you have a great travel to APTACSM in San Diego.
Thanks, Jess. Have a great one.
And now a word from our sponsor. Did you know that sport helmets are rated on a 5-star system similar to cars? And the safest helmets have nothing to do with price, brand, or availability? Since 2011, Virginia Tech researchers have been providing unbiased helmet ratings that allow consumers to make informed decisions when purchasing helmets. The helmet ratings are the culmination of over a decade of research identifying which helmets best reduce concussion risk. This work is done as part of Virginia Tech's service mission and is 100% independent of any funding or influence from helmet manufacturers. Our mission at Concussion Corner is to expose you, the listener, to trusted spaces in the concussion arena that translate to clinic next day. Please visit the Virginia Tech Helmet Lab website in our show notes or at bit.ly/Virginia Tech Helmets and spread the word to aid in lowering concussion risk in your community.
Thank you for listening to the Concussion Corner, hosted by Dr. Jessica Schwartz. The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and not to be used as personal medical advice. Don't forget to follow us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at Concussion Corner.